Okay, so I'm planning to do 2 short videos on sub, and this one will be looking purely at the historical context, which is quite important in this poem, probably one of the poems it is most important in the Feminine Gospels collection. So, first stanza, we are looking at the 1966 World Cup, the only time so far that England has won the World Cup. And it was a pretty spectacular match in the final. England won against West Germany. I apologise if I just got Britain and England mixed up. I don't know very much about football, so I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be England, not Britain. But so England won in 1966 thanks to Sir Geoff Hurst, who bagged a hat-trick. So 3 out of those 4 goals for England were scored by Sir Geoff Hurst, and he scored 2 of them during extra time. In second stanza, moving on from football to rugby. So the Grand Slam is an annual tournament for the 5 nations, or it's now the 6 nations, but during the times and this is referring to, it would have been the 5 nations. And England won the 5 nations Grand Slams in 1957, 80, 91, 92, 95, and they did win them in 2003, but I've realised that actually as this collection was published in 2002, there wouldn't be any after that time. I haven't been able to pinpoint which match it might refer to, but those are the years that England won the Grand Slams. I'm sorry if the yellow makes the reading hard, or the writing hard to see, but this is third stanza, and we're looking at the Beatles. So the Beatles went on a world tour in 1964, and they visited Down Under, Australia and New Zealand, for about 3 weeks. Weeks. In June, so they were there from about the 12th of June till the end of the month. And now, interestingly, Duffy lists these songs that they sang: Help, Day Tripper, Money, This Boy, Girl, She Loves You. And actually, Help, Girl and Day Tripper weren't released until the following year. They weren't released until 1965. So that is worth noting, that in this stanza, about the Beatles, Duffy goes beyond just their world tour. In fact, the only 2 songs out of the list which are said to be typical songs on their tour that Duffy mentions are She Loves You and This Boy. So although Day Tripper was out, it didn't feature prominently on the tour. Okay, so then in the 4th stanza, the focus is the moon landing, 1969. So basics, so it was Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin who went to the moon in 1969, although Collins was also an astronaut aboard the spaceship. They were on the Apollo 11 mission, and then got to the moon 21st of July 1969. So Armstrong's famous line was, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." And Armstrong says that actually you have the word "a" in there. The idea that it's a small step for a single man, giant leap for mankind as a whole. but that the A was fuzzy because of the reception being quite poor because he was on the moon. So that's mainly the first half of the stanza referring to the moon landing. And then in the second half of the stanza, you have the link to Apollo 13. So Houston, we don't have a problem is a play on the idiomatic line, Houston, we have a problem, which is reported to have been a quote from Lavelle on the Apollo 13 mission in 1970. But actually, it was Houston, we've had a problem. And it was said, first of all, by Swigger, I'm not sure how you say his name. And then when Houston asked them to repeat it, it was repeated by Lavelle. And it's also worth noting that Houston, we've had a problem, was this wasn't the first time it had been said, because Houston was ground control. So whenever there were problems in space, this was a routine way of recording them. The line was later picked up as the tag for the 1995 film Apollo 13, which is how it's become an idiomatic phrase. I also want to pick up on the reference to Emily Dickinson, about that they buried her poems on the moon. So Emily Dickinson was a prolific writer in the Victorian period, wrote between 1,700 and 1,800 poems, which is pretty impressive. Characteristics of her writing include hyphens and capitalisation, the use of irregular metre, and all three of those are actually things which are also quite typical of Duffy. Interesting though, not so much in this poem as in some others, but they do feature it in some. And she also wrote on the themes of nature, death and religion. Then looking at the fifth stanza, and we're back at sports. So this is cricket. So Beatty was the nickname of Ian Botham, who was a very skilled English cricketer, while Lilly refers to Dennis Lilly, who was an Australian cricketer who had a very fast bowl. So they both played during the late 1970s and early 1980s. I haven't been able to identify a particular moment that I think this stanza is referring to. So again, if you have any ideas, I'd be interested to see them in the comments. Another thing just to note is that here where you're talking about googlies, bosies, Chinamen, zooters, they're all different ways that you can throw a ball in cricket. I'm not going to give you the definitions, but if you look them up, then you'll discover that they are all effectively ways to throw a ball in cricket. And when we're looking at the sixth and seventh stanzas, we're here getting several things in one stanza. So whereas for the first stanzas, the whole stanza had one theme, we saw this a little bit in the fourth and fifth, but it was, you didn't need to pick up on Emily Dick. Whereas once we're into these two stanzas, really clearly there are several allusions within each stanza. So not much fit. So Graham Taylor was not much fit after an injury he received and retired in 1972, but he went on to become a manager, and he did manage England 1990 to 1993. And then Beckham, well, that actually really confused me when it said World Cup win Beckham, because I actually asked my dad if David Beckham had been alive in 1966, and I didn't realise until after I'd asked the question quite how stupid that question sounded. But what happened in 2001 was that a qualifying match for the 2002 World Cup, it was against Greece in the 93rd minute, having missed several free kicks earlier in the game. David Beckham made one of his most spectacular free kicks and saw England qualify for the final. Then go slightly back in time, go back to 1999, the year I was born. Bobby Joe was the winning horse at the 1999 Grand National, which is held at Aintree. He was ridden by jockey Paul Carberry and won by 10 lengths. Don't actually know what that means, but it's a term in horse racing. So in 1965 and 1966, you've got Bob Dylan, who played with the band or the Hawks on his US and world tour. So he went on a US tour in 1965. I've got Muhammad Ali. Now you'll notice that I've got an A here. In the book Feminine Gospels, it's an E, but that I believe is a typo, because Muhammad Ali would be a different person. And the fact that it refers to Cooper suggests quite strongly that it is Muhammad Ali, who met Henry Cooper in 2 fights, so 1963 and 1966. Ali did win both fights, but I think it was the 1963 fight. It could have been the 1966 one. I'm sorry, I can't remember. Henry Cooper did a left hook, which proved very successful. And afterwards, Ali spoke of Cooper with great respect, saying he had actually underestimated him and he was one of the best boxers he had played against. Oh, I'm sorry, just had to start a colour mix up there. So Graham Hill was Formula One champion in 1962 and 1968. I couldn't find anything about when he recorded the fastest recorded speed, but those were the 2 years that he was Formula One champion. And then so Borg and McEnroe, they were both very talented tennis players, had a long-standing rivalry. In 1980, the pair met in the Wimbledon final, and Borg just won from effectively under McEnroe's nose, so it seems likely that Duffy is referring to the 1980 match. But it's also worth noting that in 1981 they met again and McEnroe won.